There's an old saying you only get one chance to make a first impression, and that is never more relevant than in the world of television. A great first episode can quickly win over an audience and set up a show for a lengthy and successful run. While it's not unusual for a show to slowly grow its audience, it's a hell of a lot easier if you have them hooked from the very start. But before creators can even begin to worry about winning over viewers, first they have to win over the networks. The business has shifted in recent years, but for decades television ran under a model known as pilot season. Before the new fall schedule was set, networks would commission creators to make a single episode, better known as the pilot, and use the strength of that episode to judge if they could fit it in that year's lineup. To ensure no gaps in their scheduling, networks would always order more than they needed, which meant there were far more pilots that were unsold than those that were actually bought. There's plenty of reasons for why a show might not get picked up, but more often than not it's because, well, it kinda stunk. They didn't become shows because if they did, the shows would have probably been bad. There are plenty of examples of unsold pilots that fit that criteria, like the American adaptation of Fawlty Towers, or the American adaptation of Spaced, or the American adaptation of Peep Show, or the American... Okay, they aren't all just failed adaptations of British shows. As far as I know, the idea behind Baczynski was born and bred right here in the US of A.
Look at me. I've become a dog. It's all sinking in now.
But even though there are countless examples of pilots that should have never been shows, there are a very small amount that really should have become series. These are the well-made pilots that seem like they had potential, but still for some reason never made it past network executives. They're so captivating that when you watch them, you can't help but wonder what could have been. There aren't many of them, but the few that are out there are legendary. And none of them more so than the topic of today's video. This is Pop Culture Hyperfixations, and today we're taking a look at Lookwell. The story of Lookwell actually originates 25 years earlier with a then relatively unknown actor named Adam West. For over a decade, West had worked steadily in Hollywood, but had yet to find a role that would catapult him to the next level. All that changed in 1966 when the 39-year-old West would take on the part that would define his career, when he signed on to play the Cape Crusader in ABC's new Batman series. The show quickly became a phenomenon, frequently finishing in the top 10 during its inaugural season. It was one of those rare shows that children and adults enjoyed equally. Kids loved it because it was, well, Batman, and adults loved it because of how self-aware and funny it was. Honestly, I could go on and on about everything that made that show so great. Everything from the costuming, to the writing, to the performances were all spectacular. But I don't think it's unfair to say that the show doesn't work without Adam West. Everyone on the show was great, but West as Batman was the glue that held the whole thing together. Based in part off the strength of that performance, Batmania swept the nation, and soon Adam West was a household name. Unfortunately, the admiration of the public is fleeting, and the show's popularity quickly dwindled. The network milked the show for all it was worth, and by the time it was taken off the air in 1968, they had aired a staggering 120 episodes in just 2 years. West wanted to keep his career momentum going, but unfortunately that would not be the case. Like so many other performers who inhabited an iconic role, he found himself typecast and unable to receive meaningful work. He still appeared in various TV shows, but those appearances didn't pay the bills. So to earn money, he spent most of the 70s traveling across the country making personal appearances dressed up as Batman. It was such an odd time for West that he even found himself on an episode of Memphis Wrestling verbally sparring with Jerry the King Lawler.
I want to say that that costume that you're wearing, if you are indeed the evil king of Memphis, has been stolen from a friend of mine, Soup. Superman, I call him Soup.
If the 70s were a bad time for his career, the 80s were worse. He was still offered work, but the stuff he was being offered was trash. Looking at his IMDb is pretty depressing. Zombie Nightmare, Night of the Kickfighters, the Female Mud Wrestling World Championships. And no, that isn't a movie, that was an actual event where he coached against, what's his name? The person who's always standing and walking. Oh yeah, Rory Calhoun. In 1986, he did land a role in the NBC police comedy The Last Precinct. Even though the show was created by TV icon Stephen J. Cannell, and given the primo spot of a post-Super Bowl premiere, it was still cancelled after only 8 episodes. He continued to take jobs where he could, which included roles in over a dozen pilots that never made it to series. One of those pilots was for a proposed show on Nickelodeon called Cartoon Lost and Found. The show itself isn't really important to our story, as much as who was working on it. One of the writers for the pilot was named Spike Feresten. In future years, Spike would gain a reputation as a writer for Late Show with David Letterman, Seinfeld, Bean Movie, and his own talk show on Fox, but at the time of the Cartoon Lost and Found pilot, he was writing at Saturday Night Live. It was at SNL one day that Spike began telling one of his fellow writers about his new gig working with the former Batman. Spike had no idea of knowing it, but he just sparked inspiration inside that coworker. His name was Robert Smigel. And as he thought about what Spike had told him, an idea formulated in his head.
Those stolen cars are being transported to another country.
Mr. Lookwell?
Sorry. Used to play detective. Mind can't help but make deductions.
You'd expect nothing less from Smigel, a writer so brilliant that his friend and fellow SNL writer Bob Odenkirk once credited with saving sketch comedy in America. Like so many SNL alumni, Smigel had honed his craft at Chicago's Second City, forming a comedy troupe called All You Can Eat. When his fellow troupe member Dave Reynolds was cast by SNL veterans Al Franken and Tom Davis in their film One More Saturday Night, a meeting with the pair opened the door enough for Smigel to get hired at the show. Even though it was his first TV writing job, within a few years Smigel had already established himself as one of the greatest writers in the show's history. By the time of his fateful conversation with Spike, Smigel was responsible for some of the iconic SNL sketches of the era, including Stand Up and Win, Trekkies, and The Superfans. The Superfans sketch actually originated outside the confines of Studio 8H. During a writer's strike in 1988, Smigel traveled back to Chicago to produce a sketch show called The Happy Happy Good Show. He didn't go alone though. He brought with him Bob Odenkirk and a Harvard graduate who had just recently joined the show, Conan O'Brien. A few months earlier, Conan had been hired by SNL after stints working for Not Necessarily the News and The Wilton North Report. Though he was hired alongside his writing partner and future television showrunner extraordinaire Greg Daniels, it was a partnership with Smigel that would go on to define Conan's career. It was during that run in Chicago doing the Happy Happy Good Show that Smigel and Conan's friendship was cemented. And one of the things they bonded over was a shared love of Adam West and Batman. Smigel is on record saying that he considers West's performance in the 1966 Batman feature film to be one of the greatest comedy performances of all time. And Conan's fandom ran so deep that when Burt Ward brought the Robin costume to Harvard, Conan and his friends stole the outfit as a prank and spent the rest of the day taunting him with clues on how to find it like they were the Riddler. So on that fateful day, it just made sense to Smigel that Conan should be the first one to hear what he came up with. It was in the control room of SNL where Smigel made his big pitch. Adam West as an actor used to be a detective, but now he thinks he can actually solve crimes. Conan absolutely loved the idea.
Yeah, it's really funny.
With that unbridled enthusiasm, the pair got to work on crafting their vision. While the show was written with Adam West in mind, he wasn't their only source of inspiration. Both men had an affinity for 70s detective shows, particularly the works of Quinn Martin. They used that genre as the launching point and took joy making fun of its various tropes. Even naming the show Lookwell was a bit of a joke, as it parodied how seemingly every one of those shows was named after the main character. Hell, the name of the show within the show was a joke about how they all blended together.
Well, it's nice to meet you. You know, I remember Banachek. That was a great show.
No, I wasn't Banachek. That was George Peppard. I was Bannigan.
Brannigan?
No, that was Hugh O'Brien. I was Bannigan.
Oh, right. You had the black secretary.
No, that was Mannix. I had a sheepdog.
Right.
With the help of SNL producer Lorne Michaels and super agent Bernie Brillstein, the two were able to get a pilot ordered from NBC. The network found the script hilarious, but they did have a condition. They, in no uncertain terms, did not want Adam West. They forced the pair to audition virtually every other age-appropriate actor in Hollywood. Actors like Max Baer Jr., Chad Everett, Anthony Franciosi, and Monty Markham were all brought in, but Smigel and O'Brien were adamant that West was the man for the job. Finally, they were able to break the network down and convince them to let West audition. He absolutely crushed it and won himself the job. It can't be understated how high people were on the project. Bernie Brillstein thought it would be a hit, as did NBC executive Rick Ludwig. But nobody seemed more enthusiastic than NBC president Brandon Tartikoff. Tartikoff probably deserves a documentary, as his influence on television was massive. All you really need to know is not only was he an incredibly successful executive who turned NBC into a powerhouse in the 1980s, he did so with a creative vision that isn't always seen in that line of work. It's hard to find anyone who has anything bad to say about the guy, and that includes Conan and Smigel, who could not have found Tartikoff easier to work for. He trusted the pair so much that he hardly gave them any notes. They could not have had a stronger advocate. When it came time to actually shoot the pilot, Conan and Smigel wanted the show to visually resemble those 70s detective shows they had loved. So on the advice of Lorne Michaels, they sought out a journeyman director who had that experience. They eventually hired a prolific TV director named E.W. Swackhammer, who had directed hundreds of TV shows, including 8 episodes of Jake and the Fat Man, which I bring up only as an excuse to point out that a show called Jake and the Fat Man got 106 episodes. Swackhammer was a consummate professional, but his style clashed with Conan and Smigel. The pair were constantly pitching jokes and trying to perfect the scenes, which clashed with Swackhammer's philosophy. As Robert Smigel explained in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, what we didn't realize was that these kind of technician directors weren't used to having nerdy young writers hover over every line asking for take after take until the actor does it the way that they had in their head. The 70s crime show directors were used to banging this stuff out, having actors show up, do their lines once or twice, yelling cut, and being in their pajamas by 4 p.m. But other than that tension, the pilot went off without a hitch. And after lunch one day, the network finally got to take a look at their new project. To say they were unprepared for what they saw would be an understatement.
Good evening. I have a home. Hello, nice to be indoors. Hi there, the sidewalk is my pillow.
In the pilot, Adam West plays Ty Lookwell, an out-of-work actor who hasn't done anything of consequence since his 1970s cop show Bannigan went off the air. He spends most of his days watching old episodes of his show, going on auditions, and teaching his acting class the lessons he learned from his days as a TV star. When he stumbles upon a car theft, Lookwell decides it's up to him to solve the case. After all, he is an honorary deputy dating back to a ceremony in Studio City. He's even got a badge. He recruits some of his students, including future Academy Award nominated director Todd Field, into his quest to solve the crime. Fun fact, one of the ideas for the show, if it had continued, was to cast celebrities going through their 15 minutes of fame as cameos in the acting class. They were unable to get one for the pilot, but they had come close to landing Gary Hart's mistress Donna Rice and Donald Trump's ex-wife Marla Maples. Now, the most important part of Lookwell's characterization you should know is he is a crazy person. He's an absolute lunatic who exists in a different plane of reality. He is wrong virtually every step of the way and only solves the case completely by accident. With all that being said, this is one of the funniest episodes of television I've ever seen. The actual plot of the episode is admittedly weak, with Smigel saying in later years that if the show had been picked up, they would have had to find a mystery writer to handle that part. But I don't really care about the lackluster plot because Adam West is just so captivating. Much like he did with Batman, he so fully commits to the idea that it makes this absurd premise work. I think you should definitely watch the whole thing, but I still pulled out a few of my favorite parts.
Look, I didn't want to bring this up, but that blinker makes a click-click sound.
It's supposed to, sir.
Aren't you Ty Lookwell?
Yes, but until this audition's over, I prefer to be addressed as Buzz McCool. Did you do that shopping I asked you to do?
I tried, but the store said they don't make that hairspray anymore.
Those fools.
Well, what do we do now, Mr. Lookwell?
Not to worry. Every good undercover man has a plan B.
Buddy, what? Hey, security! Buddy, what are you doing? Get up.
Even though I loved it, when it was made, I was 3 years old and not working for NBC, so I didn't really get much say in its survival. Those working for the network weren't nearly as enthusiastic as I am. While the show had the support of Brandon Tartikoff, by the time the pilot was completed, Tartikoff had left the network and become the chairman of Paramount Pictures. So Warren Littlefield came on as president, and as is so often the case in television whenever a new executive comes in, he was reticent to greenlight the works of a previous regime. Littlefield was a good executive in his own right, but he didn't think Lookwell was right for the network. The quote that was attributed to him was, "A little bit of Adam goes a long way." Despite a foul-mouthed rant by their agent Bernie Brillstein that saw Bernie tell NBC they'd be insane to turn down Lookwell at the same time they were trying to create a TV show for Toonces the Driving Cat, the show would not be picked up. Neither would Toonces for that matter. Instead, the fall lineup that year would feature such iconic comedies as Nurses, Pacific Station, Flesh and Blood, and The Torkelsons. With hindsight, Smigel and Conan have questioned whether a Lookwell series would have worked. wondering if audiences back then were prepared to root for such a psychotic main character. In my opinion, much like when they believed Jay Leno would leave The Tonight Show without a fuss, they were wrong. I think it was a show that may not have been a hit, but it would have found an audience loyal enough to keep it on the air for a little while. They just needed to see it. Well, on Sunday, July 28, 1991, audiences did get their one and only chance to see the show. The summer was a dead time for television, so networks would usually burn off unsold pilots to fill airtime, and Lookwell was shown with virtually zero fanfare. NBC aired the show at 7:30 p.m. as part of a doubleheader with another unsold pilot starring MTV comedian Julie Brown. To show how little anyone cared, the TV listings referenced a Robert Wagner cameo that, as far as I can tell, never happened. Even NBC treated the show like such an afterthought that when it aired on the East Coast, the sound mixing was so bad that it was basically unwatchable. Of the 92 shows that aired that week, Lookwell finished 92nd, not able to even beat the Julie Brown show. Okay, so remember 1 minute ago when I said if people saw it, then they would have liked it and it would have stayed on the air? Yeah, so I was wrong.
Glad to see you catch up with the rest of us, Jason.
After Lookwell's demise, all three men were disappointed, but none more than Adam West. In several interviews, he would indicate that this was the only pilot he filmed that he really wanted to see turn into a series. The three men all went their separate ways. Robert Smigel chose to go back and continue writing for Saturday Night Live, but Conan made the bold decision to leave the show without any idea what to do next. Within weeks, he received a job offer that would change TV history, as he joined the staff of The Simpsons. There, he helped write some of the greatest episodes in the show's history, and helped hone his comedic skills so much that when David Letterman left NBC in 1993, Conan was able to win the job. He knew if he was going to replace Letterman, he needed a strong head writer, and so he reunited with Robert Smigel, and together they crafted the genius that was Late Night with Conan O'Brien. The show went through its struggles early on, but was given enough leeway that within a few years, it was without a doubt the funniest late night show on TV. As their reputation grew, so did a desire to see their previous work. Lookwell became legendary to comedy nerds, as they traded tapes of its only airing. As it and other pilots like it started spreading, a comedy collective out of Los Angeles called the Uncabaret started showing those unsold pilots as part of a show called The Other Network. While initially unaware of the growing interest in Lookwell, word of mouth eventually spread to Smigel and O'Brien. In Conan's case, it was literal word of mouth, as it wasn't until Jack Black expressed an affinity for the show to him that Conan realized people were watching it. Black is on the list of many people who have expressed an affinity for Lookwell, including Elijah Wood and Bill Maher, who said Lookwell was the funniest half-hour comedy he's ever seen. And that holds a lot of water coming from the star of Pizza Man.
Ronald Reagan and Geraldine Ferraro?
I can explain this.
Smigel and O'Brien openly embraced the newfound appreciation for their work. The television network Trio would frequently air the pilot as part of their Brilliant but Cancelled series, and they would do talking head interviews for a documentary on the channel discussing unmade shows. Although Conan and Smigel still see the flaws in Lookwell, they both still hold the experience in high regard. During a commencement speech at Harvard in 2000, Conan would reference the show when discussing to the graduates on how to handle adversity. It's an important lesson that even though Smigel and Conan became two of the premier comedy voices of their generation, they still had to overcome failure. But even though for most people the legacy of Lookwell is about what Conan and Smigel did not achieve, to me the legacy of the show is about what Adam West did. It's not a story about failure, it's a story about perseverance. Much like the character of Ty Lookwell, Adam West kept marching forward against all odds until he found the success that had eluded him. Even though the show was not made, I think it was a clear delineation in Adam's career. Lookwell was a canary in a coal mine, as the rest of the 90s would see him return to the public eye. All those kids who had grown up loving Batman were adults now, and they were all quick to jump at the chance to work with their childhood hero. His work as a voiceover artist was especially prolific, including an appearance on Cartoon Network's Johnny Bravo, which is where he first met Seth MacFarlane. MacFarlane loved West so much that years later, when he created Family Guy, he brought Adam on board to play a fictionalized version of himself as the mayor. As usual, Adam West crushed the part, and I'm pretty sure half the lines I know from the show are just weird things he said.
Nobody messes with Adam Wee.
His part on Family Guy brought new attention to West, and I think it's safe to say that to younger generations, he is more defined as Adam West than he is as Batman. The 2000s would see his career prospects continue to improve as he got to experience the appreciation he so rightfully deserved. Despite all that, Adam still felt that Lookwell was the one that got away, so through the years he would call up Robert Smigel and ask if they wanted to give it another go. Smigel would decline, citing that the show could only work if Conan got involved. The trio would never collaborate again, but there was talk of a reunion at San Diego Comic-Con that would feature the three of them airing and discussing the pilot for the first time ever. Unfortunately, that reunion would never come to pass, as sadly on June 9, 2017, Adam West passed away at the age of 88 years old. In recent years, Smigel has mentioned that studio executives have reached out to him to try and get a Lookwell movie going, including a pitch that would see Nick Cage take the title role. But Smigel has declined every offer, saying there was only ever one Lookwell, and his name was Adam West. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And what's the TV show you wish had gotten made? Is it Lookwell? Is it Heat Vision and Jack? Is it a third show I've never heard of but will become my personality for a few weeks? Let me know in the comments.